All right, are we recording? Yes. So I just wanted to show. So I sent everybody the Excel file. I did want to show some folks just a quick thing you can do in Excel. So I just got this data. I literally just Googled tallest mountains on the planet or whatever. And on Wikipedia, they have a list of all of the tallest peaks, their names, their, rank, the countries they're in, their, latitude, longitude. So those of you who are using, might use Excel or online data or something like that you want to pull in, I just wanted to show you this quick little tip. Maybe you all know it. That when you're pulling data off the internet, sometimes if you're lucky, especially with like Wikipedia kind of stuff, you can. Now I gotta remember how to do it. Oh, data. So if you go to the data tab in Excel, you can do a get data, and you should be able to get data from web. So if I come back here and I copy this URL. I come back and I paste that URL here. It'll think for a second. And then it'll say, okay, I looked on this page and hey, I found this table on the page. So you can load that data directly from the internet and it should just plop it all in. This is right from the website. In theory, you could update it. If it's something that updates regularly, you can kind of reload this data and get the latest stuff. So this is all I did to get this information. I called out some of this because I wasn't going to use all of it. I didn't want to make it so, too robust. But just a quick tip on how you might want to get stuff quickly from the internet that if that's what you're doing. And also, like the good part about it is it can be kind of a table that you can update as new data comes in. So I'm going to close that out real fast. I don't want to save that. So all I did was download it. I took out some stuff. I kept the rank, the name. I did adjust the this just so everybody knows. So whenever you're pulling data in, I adjusted this the height column because when I pull it in from online, it was kind of text and it wasn't formatted properly. So I just wanted it to be raw numbers. So I reformatted that in Excel just to have raw numbers. And then I used some quick formulas because I wanted to pull out latitudes and longitudes as decimal numbers rather than these minutes, seconds, degrees, minutes, and seconds. So I just used some Excel formulas to kind of pull out these into those decimal numbers so we could use them inside of Grasshopper. So that's why if you look at both the one on the online and this one, they're a little different. The greater point being that when you're using numbers, you need to make sure that when it's coming out of Excel, it's actually a number and not being registered as some sort of text or something. Because when it had the commas in it, it wasn't registering properly. Okay, any questions so far on any of that? So if you have Rhino open in Excel, or Rhino and Grasshopper open, it's pretty easy to get the data in. So I actually don't know where it is up top, but if you type in, double click and type in Excel, there's Excel Reader, and you'll see that you have a node with 3 inputs. So we have read Excel data, we have workbook path, and the worksheet name. So does anybody have an idea what we might put into that read Excel data plug? Close. The file path goes into a workbook path. What's that? So we have workbook path, and if you hover over it, you'll see that it says the path to the Excel workbook, right? So we can put that in. So we'll do file path. So you just put in a file path node. Right click, set one existing file, go to the file that I sent you. So the key part of the Excel file that is worth noting, assume all of you have Excel, is it has to be like a 97 Excel file. It can't be the latest Excel XLS or whatever. There are different file types. Like the latest Excel file type is like an XLSL or something. XLSX. The file type actually for Grasshopper needs to be an XLS.
So would you really save it down?
So you would down save. So if you downloaded it, you just make sure you down save it to that 97 to 2003 workbook. So that's the one I sent you. So hopefully that is still the case for you. So I click open for that file path. I plug that into workbook path. So back to that top one. What do we think we need to put into read Excel data?
Is it a toggle?
What kind of toggle?
It's just a yes or I forget what they're called though.
What's that? It's a Boolean toggle. And do we know what it means to be a Boolean? What a Boolean is? Talked about it a little bit. We know that there's Boolean union and Boolean difference and stuff is in Rhino, but this is a different kind of Boolean. Anybody remember?
True.
True or false? Brandon got it right. So, was that what you were going to say, Trayvon? So if you double click and you type in toggle, you'll see Boolean toggle. So you can place that in. So what this is just this toggles back and forth between true and false. So keep it false for now and plug that in. So what this tells Grasshopper, does anybody have an idea what this is telling this node when it's false? What's that?
Don't read it yet.
Don't do anything. Don't bring in the data yet. It will also, if you change, it's not a live connection, so like it'll read it once and bring all the data in. You can put like timers on it and things like that where it will just constantly, like every 30 seconds, read it again, read it again, read it again. We don't need that right now. So once you push true on this, it'll bring all the data in. If you change that file and want to bring it in again, you toggle it to false, toggle it back to true, and it'll bring it back in again, right? So that's what that's for. So what do we think we need to put in for worksheet name? The Excel wizards. No idea?
Oh, would it be the actual, because you can have multiple sheets in Excel, so the actual name of it.
Yeah, in Excel you can have multiple sheets down here, right? So we only have one and it's called mountains. So you need to tell Grasshopper which worksheet are you pulling from? Where am I getting my data from? So we need to put the word mountains into that node. Anybody have an idea how we might want to do that? Panel, yes, exactly, Alexis. So if you put a panel, double click, put a panel.
Does that have to be capitalized as well?
It has to match exactly the way sentence case, which is what it is right now, but if it was all caps, it needs to be all caps, all lowercase, it needs to be all lowercase. This is coding, it's dumb, it doesn't know those things. It's gonna look exactly for what you type in, right? So this case here needs to match exactly. If you want to be cool, you could just double click in there, copy the text, and then come back over to Rhino, double click in the panel, paste, and now I have just the word mountains here, the same case as it is on the Excel file, and I can plug that into the worksheet name.
In my view, I have a little some stuff on top of the panel. I don't know.
Oh, you zoom into the first.
Yeah, I did.
That's just formatting for the panel. I think it's important. So the worksheet name at the bottom, so you see where the little tab says mountains?
Yes.
If you double click on that, it should select the text, you can just copy that. Okay. So that way the text is exactly the same. Haley?
Oh wait, that actually.
Everyone else good? Okay. So if we want, before we hit true, some of you may have already hit true. I'm just going to put another panel here at the end just to see what pops out. So you'll see I'm going to plug the Excel data into there. And right now it says null because nothing's coming through. So if I double click this to true, it'll take a second. But then you'll see that once it registers, that it pulls everything that's in that Excel file in here. So I have all my latitudes and longitudes, all these numbers, all these different things. I have all the data in this tab. So you'll notice, what is this called again? What are these called? This is a index. These are indexes. It's a list, so we have indexes, right? We have two kinds of indexes. We have the index of where these numbers are in here, and then we have the index that is the list that it's in, right? So this is the 0 list, the 0 sublist. So that's the first column. So you see if I go back to my Excel file, my rank is my first column. So I have the first, so the header of the column is the first value, the 0 value. And if I scroll down, I have my second sublist, which is my number 1 sublist here. And you'll see that's mountain name, and the first, the 0 index here is the column header, right? Does everybody have that information? Okay. So now all our data, in theory, is here. We just have to manipulate it in some way or another. So how do we want to manipulate it? So we have, let's just say, let's say we're looking at the tallest mountains in the world, right? So let's say I want to grab that height. I want to grab just this sublist. I want these numbers, the heights of all the mountains in order. How might I go grab that? Anybody have any ideas?
Just the heights.
Just the heights. Because right now if I were to plug, sorry?
Index.
Something with the index.
Oh, so you identify 0 or something?
Say it again, is that when?
Re-identify, you try to find a specific point, which mountain height, is that right?
So right now I have 120 value. I have multiple lists. I don't know how many lists I have. However many columns I have. Go down the bottom here. So I have like 14 different lists, each of which have 120 items now, because that's how many different mountains we're looking at. So we have 100. So I just want to grab one of these lists. I just want to grab the heights, because the rest of the data isn't important to me. Well, right now at least it's not important to me. So so these are the names.
Grab a list, a specific list.
So I just want to grab the number. I just want to grab this list, this number 2. So there's one easy way to do it. We haven't used this node yet, so I don't fault you for knowing. So there is a node called Explode Tree, right? And it gives you a little tree, and it says data, and it tells you, well, branch 0 and branch 1. So this basically says, hey, I have a tree of data. I have data that's in multiple lists, multiple branches of data, right? Because what we could have done, or what somebody kind of started to suggest, list item is this value, where we could take, let's get the data, and let's look at I just want to grab the number 2. I want to grab the second list in this tree of data here. But what you'll see here is when I do that, when I say get the second index, so that's a number slide, this is a get item, a list item node. I plug the list in, I plug the second item index in. What it's actually giving me is the second item in all of the lists, right? So if I look here, it says the second list, list number, sublist 1, K2. If I go up here and I go to the mountain name, you'll see that K2 is the second item in the list. So it's going to all 14 lists and grabbing all the information. So this is just all the information for K2, right? If That's not what we want. We want all the heights. So we want the second sublist, right? So with this, I'm going to delete that. With this branch node, what you'll see comes out is it grabs all the branches, right? So if I plug 0 into here, it grabs just that first 0 list. The second, the 1 list grabs the mountain names. Or I guess is that the mountain? Yeah, it gives mountain names. But I want the second list here. So if you scroll in, you'll see pluses and minuses. I can add another branch, and you'll see that with that branch, with that number 2, I've grabbed only the heights. Everybody following along? We understand? Does that make some sort of sense? So if I wanted to grab the third item in the list, which is the range, I would just scroll in here, I'd hit a plus sign, and then I can grab only the range. So it's just grabbing all the data that's in that second sublist or third or first or 0 item list. But I still have a problem. Let's say, well, let's do something else before we get to the problem. So let's just say we wanted to make some sort of like path, and on that path we wanted to have individual like curves that for each, so there would be a curve for every single mountain, and the center, the high point of the curve was in relation to that high point of the mountain or something simple, right? So let's just inside of Rhino, just draw any sort of curve path that you want. Make it kind of long. And then we'll just copy that over a little bit so we have 2 curves. So what I'm saying is we take this curve and we're going to create arcs along this curve. So we'll have a bunch of different points along each curve that are representative of each mountain. I want a point on both curves that kind of line up, that are the same as so I have the same number of points as I do mountains. And then I'm going to make a curve between those 2 lines, and I'm going to relate the height of that curve to the mountain. Seems relatively simple. So in order to do that, what do you think the first thing you might do here is? So it's the first thing, I'll tell you what the first thing, you tell me how you think you might do it. I want to create points along these curves, the same number of points as there are mountains. Good array. Maybe a good array. But I want the points to be on the curve.
Are you doing this in Grasshopper?
Doing Grasshopper, yeah. Divide. So I have divide curve is a tool. And I have 3 things. I only really need 2. I have the curve and I have the count. So how do we get the curves in there? So we want these 2 curves.
I think it's set curve. Well, just the curve.
Yes. So we will put in a curve node. We'll drop that in, and then we right-click on that. We set multiple curves. Pick both curves. Right-click to be done. Now I should have my 2 curves in there, and I can plug my curves into the curve tool, and it automatically, if you hover over the count, you can see that it's automatically separating that into 10 points. I don't want, oh, Traylon. We're good? Thank you, Professor Alexis. Everybody else cool? We got that? So we don't want 10 points. We want a curve that represents each mountain. So a dot, a point on this curve that represents each mountain. How do we do that? Yeah, there's no dice. Alexis, what's that? So we could do a slider. There's one way to do it. So we could say, okay, we have 120 items in this list. I could make a slider. It goes to 120. And I could plug in the count, and then I have 120 points on that curve. It's one way to do it. That's not super smart. It's smart in that it works. But if this list was to change, then I have to make sure I change my number, right? So does anybody have an idea of how we could make it so that it's parametric in the sense that if I added another 50 mountains to this list, that I would get another 50 points?
The domain of the index. Domain of the index. Or like, what is index?
Index. Sort of. There's a really easy node. We want to get the length of the list. List. There's a node called list length. So if you plug that, if you type in list length, you'll see that I can plug in the list here, and if I hover over, I'll get the number of items that is in that list.
Oh, that's crazy.
So then I can just plug in that directly into the count, and now I have a parametrically, this is kind of, it's the less sliders you have to change that work for you, the better, right? Sliders are our friend most of the time, but in this case, you could do one. It wouldn't be wrong. You just need to make sure you update it every time you change it. Brandon.
But that list is still counting like that title. So how do we like?
So Brandon discovered our problem. So if you look in this list, Brandon is saying we still have the column header in there, right? So my first point in here isn't related to a height. So if I was to do a height later, I would get some sort of error because I don't have a number here, right?
You just do subtract one.
So you can subtract one. I gotta remember, is it?
Going down the list.
I think what we actually want. Trying to remember. What's that? I can't hear you.
I just plugged the subtraction thing and it worked.
Oh, you can just subtract? There's another node I think it's this. So maybe we can do that. That seems to work. There, I think it's this node. It's called shift list. Yes. Oh, no, it shifts it down. That's not what I want.
Oh, wait, maybe. After that, we should have 119, right?
We should have. You would have 119. 119 would be the final number. You'd have 120 items. Because 0 is in there. Oh, I can't remember what it is right this second. It's not shift, sort, longest, split. So you could do this node, which is called, I'm sorry, I couldn't remember what it was, I apologize. So this is called a split. You type in split list is a node, and it says, what list do you want to split, and starting where, in what index do you want to start, do you want to split it out at, right? So if I put in like a number here of 42, it would say, okay, I'm going to put the first 41 items in list A, and then the rest of them in list B. But I only want to take out one, so I'm just going to change that number 40, that slider. So I put in a slider into the index, and I can shift that back to be 1. And you'll see that the first list is just the header, and the second list is just the numbers. think there's a bunch of other ways to do it. Zach, the way you did it, did that work as well, or no?
I think so.
I think so. What did you do exactly? No, that's. So when you put a panel out that was from the result, see what's going on. Can you plug this guy, the result here into the panel for a second? Let's see. No, see, but it's just subtract. Oh, I guess that. Well, so yours worked for our purposes, but what will not have worked is that when you use that list later, it still has the header in it, right? So this way, so you just got a number, right? So you got the right number, which is correct for this moment. But down the line a little bit, we're going to want the list of just the numbers, which this one will give us. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Everybody else following along, feel good about that? Got the numbers out? So now I'll just plug this B list into list length, which will now adjust to 120 items. So now you'll see our curves have 120 points along both.
So with that split list, could you split it into, like, I don't know why you'd want to do this, so there's more efficient ways. Could you split it into 120 lists? Because it looks like there's only list A and B. So
if you wanted to split it in, if you wanted 120 lists,
I don't know why. Like I said, I have no idea why you want that, but
so let me just. There's a real easy way to do that. I'm just going to copy this up so we can see it and it doesn't affect download stream here. So you'll see that we have a single list that has 120 items in it. That is essentially what the graph command would do, right? So if I right-click on this and I graph this, you'll now see that I have 120 individual lists. So I see I have this is list 2, semicolon 120, and that's list 000, right? So grafting will do that. That's what Brandon taught us earlier in the semester. Everybody else follow along? Feel good? Okay. So now we got this. Now we got all our lines. We got all our points. I'm sorry. So the next step is we're creating a curve. So I want to get the center point between these two lines. So I want to know where the center point is along this curve, right? Because I want to make an arc. So I want to take that. I'm going to create an arc, and we'll just show the arc command so we know what we're shooting for here. There's an arc 3-point node, which basically gives you point A, point B, and point C. If you hover over them, you have point A, which is the start point B, which is an interior point, and point C, which is the end point, right? So in theory, we have the start point, we have the end point. We don't have an interior point yet, so we need to get the interior point. So how I imagine doing that is I want to get the center point between these two, and I want to take that point, and then I want to elevate it based on that mountain height. Make sense? So how do we think we start by getting the center point between these two? Say again? Endpoints. So the endpoints node is for a line, right? So if you put in the endpoint, your input is a curve, and that'll give you your endpoints of the curve.
Isn't there a construct curve from the 2 points? But that's what we did when we did the
So sometimes in Grasshopper, you have to kind of draw things that you don't need to get other things. There we go. So what Zach said is we want to draw a line between these 2 points because there is a node, similar, kind of what Haley was insinuating. There is a line that is called curve mid. curve middle, which will give us the middle of a curve, a point that's in the middle, right? So how would we do that, Zach? So we have a line tool, so just the regular old line, which has a start point and end point. But how do we do that? So let's just see what's coming out of here. So you'll see I have, so this is just a panel to see what's coming out of that node. You'll see that I have one list of points here. I scroll down. I have a second list of points. So there's two lists. So obviously one list, I would assume, is one line worth of points, and the second list is the other line worth of points. So what were you thinking? What were you thinking, Zach? You were thinking graphed. So if I was to graph this, what happens? So now I got a single list. Now I have not quite what I want, I don't think. Because I need to plug in, I need to get one set of points and a second set of points. So we just use a node. I'll undo the graph there. We just use a node back here.
Oh, the explode tree.
The explode tree. You could also do, so we're going to do tree, explode tree. I'm going to make sure my graph, no flatten here. I plug my points in, and you'll see that I now have, I don't need to add anymore because I only have two lists. But I have the two different points, two different sets of points. So if I just to see what's there, just to like visualize it, I'm just going to put a point node here, plug that in. So you'll see that that top list is all the points along that curve. And the bottom list is all the points along that curve. So then if I just plug those, pick one as my start, one as my end, you'll see that I've now created lines between all those points. And now I already put the node in here, which was the curve, the middle curve middle, and I can plug that line into that curve, and you'll see that I get a point that's dead center of all those. That's the center point of all the lines that we drew.
Wait, what's that last name?
This one is the curve middle node. Middle curve or curve middle?
Yeah.
Curve middle. Make sense? Everybody get that? So like I said, sometimes you have to draw things that aren't part of the final thing to kind of locate stuff or get an idea of where something is. So I'm just going to hide these lines. I don't need to see them. I just want to see those middle points. And the cool thing about this, so far, is that if we change these lines, everything adjusts with it, right? So if these lines update, I shift them around, everything, it moves around it because everything's parametric except those two curves. So now that we have our midpoint, I want to offset these points. I want to raise them vertically based on my mountain, the height of my mountains here. All right, so I have all my numbers, all my mountain heights, and I want to raise these points up relative to those heights. What's my problem though? What do I want to do? First off, what node would I use? Do you think? What was that? Z, just the Z-axis?
No.
That'll be part of it. That'll be something we do plug in. Move. Simple. So we want to move the points. So we would just use the move command. And the move command wants geometry and it wants the motion. So to Zach's point, we want it to move in the Z vector, so we would plug z into there eventually. But so if I was to plug, so what would I plug into geometry? The midpoint. You see they automatically just shifted up because there is a value of 10 in there already. But I don't want to move them 10. I want each point to move relative to whatever mountain it's related to. So to Zach's point, I would put in a z vector. So you would use unit z, and I can plug that into here. It's going to adjust it down to 1. Now they only moved up 1 unit rather than 10. And I can plug in, if I plugged in, you have to do this, but if you plugged in a slider here to the factor, I can adjust where they go up and down. So that's where my numbers want to plug in, right? But what would happen, let's look at these numbers here. What would happen if I plugged in 29,029 feet? Probably going to break my computer because it's going to offset these lines in a much too far of a direction to make any sense. You did it? Did it break it? So what might I want to do to these numbers, which we've done before, to make them a little bit more realistic for the project we're working on here? Remap, yes. So if you double click, if you remember, there's a remap numbers node. What is remap? What is remap number? What does that node do, Alexis? Yeah, so you basically select a new range. You find out what the range of these numbers are, the ones we have, and you set a new range that is more reasonable. Instead of 29,000 feet, maybe it's 10. And it remaps, it reworks those numbers to keep the same relative distance between all of them, but puts them in a more reasonable order, right? So what do we plug into value?
What? Even one of the new range.
No, I mean, that's one of the things you got to plug in. But value is the numbers we want to change. So what are the values that we want to change? So we plug our big numbers into there. So then we got source domain. What does that mean?
What is it?
Which one? Sorry, this panel is coming from my list B back here where I took out the column. So this is, Zach, this is where your method of subtraction would have failed us a little because we wouldn't have gotten out that top number. So what do we think we plug into source? It says source domain, if that gives anybody a hint.
I feel like the new range of numbers.
That would be target. That would be our target range, right? But source is, we need to know what our current range is. So basically, what is our highest number and what is our lowest number? Or we need to know the bounds of this list, right? So if you type in bounds, you'll see that there's a min and bounds is a node, and it's min and max, and it pops out a domain. And if you plug your numbers, your high numbers into there, and hover over that end, it'll say your lowest number in this list is 23,600, and your highest number in this list is 29,029. Right? So that is the boundaries. That is the minimum and the maximum of our list. So that is what goes into source. So now, Ryan, we need to create the target. Well, the domain that you want. And how do we create a domain that we want? Close, that's the second word. We want to construct a domain, so we will use the construct domain node. and you'll see that it has two inputs. It has a start and an end, which means obviously the start of the domain and the end of the domain. So we can use, what do we use in those? Sliders. When in doubt, use a slider. We will say our minimum, we'll do a quick slider, so I'll do 5 dot dot 10, that'll be my low end slider. And then I'll do 10 dot dot 25 for my high end. All right, so I have a 5 and a 10 plugged in there. I'm gonna up this to 15. So I now have a domain from 5 to 15. So I plug that into my target. And then if I put another panel over here.
What is the domain command?
Construct domain. So you'll see here, I now have I have a panel before this node right here, and then the panel after this node right here. So we know, because this Excel file is listed from the tallest mountain, Mount Everest, to the shortest in this list, which is still obnoxiously tall. We know that the first value is the tallest. So you can see that value 0 is 15, which is the high end of the domain. Then the next one is 13.56, 13.4, 12.9, all the way down. So it is remapping our numbers here into a more, more reasonable value for our purposes for this. So if I wanted to adjust these points, what do I need to do with these numbers now? Plug this mapped domain, or this mapped list, not necessarily a domain, but this mapped list into the factor. And you'll see I'm going to hide some of these other points. I'm going to hide and delete that slider. I'm going to hide this midpoint. So now you'll see it's not super obvious because some of them are very similar, but you can see that we have them increasing towards the end here. So they're kind of coming up and then adjusting up to that top bit, right? So now we should have all the points to put our arc. Do I still have my arc? Must have deleted it. So I can use that arc command, which is a 3-point arc. And I now have all the points I need for that. So I'm just for cleanliness sake, I'm gonna put 2 point nodes in here. So I can grab my list here, my lists, and just move them forward a little so I know what I'm doing up here and I don't have to go backwards. So I need a start node, a start point. So we'll say that this is my start. These are my middle point and these are my end. So point A will be one side. Geometry from this move node will be point B, and then the end point will be here. And now you'll see that I should have arcs going through all those points all the way across.
What did you connect the points to?
So I made an arc. There's a node called arc 3 points. Okay. So I took the move node, the geometry of there, that geometry is my midpoint, that point up top, right? This branch back here, this exploded branch, I just added 2 point, params nodes, just because I didn't want to like drag that all the way over or like move this over. I just want to just have those things close together. This is basically just moving data around, so it's a little cleaner. I just put 2 of them up here, so I picked one side, went into point A, the high point went into the middle, point B, and then the end point went into point C. Make sense? This one, I'm going to trip over and bring.
One isn't correct.
Okay, so where? Oh, this right here. So you never plug your map points here.
Yeah.
You got to plug that into that factor. So they're all just being moved up by 39. Now, what is your yours is pretty large, so maybe up this, change your high end. Yeah, yours is very, very large, so that might be part of it. The last one, let's see here, what do we got there? 5. Remap, factor, use factor, that plugging in, it looks right. It might be your scale might be a little crazy. But when you change, can you go back to your slider? Go to that one. You just double click on the number slider bit. Change the max to like 200. Then slide that up. Alright, there we go. Now we're starting to see some more drastic. Everybody else get to that point? You understand what's happening? You understand why this is potentially useful? Yeah. So if you really wanted to, you could, you could loft all these together, loft these arcs together and make some sort of shape. I could bake this back in just to see what that looks like. So this could be a form. This could be the start of a form that you then use panels or do something on, like create the shape of something. Right? We'll get into that in a second. But what I wanted to show, the thing I wanted to do that I think is useful. So right now, this list is ordered from tallest mountain to shortest mountain. But let's say I wanted to play with the data a little bit and see what different versions of this thing looked like. Let's say I didn't want to order it from tallest to shortest. Let's say I wanted to order it from, let's see, let's go back to our Excel file here. Let's say I wanted to order it from, what's that? We could do longitude. So, right, so if I come back and if you open your Excel file, you should have a long decimal, L-O-N-G decimal. So if I use the little drop down here and I do smallest to largest, and then I save this file, and I go back to here, and I do what I said before where I toggle this false, you'll see everything disappears for a second. I toggle it back on. Now I have a different form because it's in a different order, right? So now my form is getting a little, because it's just putting it in whatever order it comes in, right?
What are you doing?
So in Excel, open up Excel. This time I'll do it in order. There's a column here that's a cents before. I'm not going to do that one. I just do this last column here. It says a cents before something. Before 2004, I guess. So I'll click the down arrow on this top column, and I can order this list however I choose. See, this is the problem. It's not numbers. So let me see if I can format. Let's not do that for a second. Let's do it. Let's answer your question, and then we'll do that. So I go to latitude. Those are numbers. Latitude decimal, LAT decimal. You can sort from largest to smallest, and then it'll reorder this whole list. So wherever the highest latitude is at the top. Make sure you save the Excel file. So just save it. Then go back to Rhino. Go back to the very beginning of your definition. Toggle this off to false. Everything disappears. Toggle it back to true. Will take a second. But then it'll be, the data is now reorganized in a different manner. So you?
Quick question.
Yes.
When I'm trying to sort the latitude in the Excel file, it's like it won't let me do it, right? Like what? Did you? So you didn't right click it, right?
Double, just click on left click.
Yeah, it won't.
Protected view. Did you save this file?
No, I didn't. It might be black. I just found one and saved it.
It might be like a read-only file.
Yeah.
Everybody else able to do that?
Okay. Alright, I'll figure it out. I just gotta, I moved it to like the.
I would save as, save it on your computer somewhere. That's probably the issue.
Yeah.
Hopefully. So you could do a bunch of stuff with this. You could even do, so just, this is just, they're just numbers, right? Let me look back at this. And you could relate different things. You could start to do different, you can use those numbers any way you want. Like I can take the same numbers that we have. I'm just going to build a quick surface. In Rhino. I'm going to bring that surface into Grasshopper by using a surface node. Set one surface, pick that one. Pull this down here for a second. We can use that. We talked about Lunchbox. Everyone should have had downloaded that. If you go into Lunchbox, we can create panels out of this thing. So there's like a quad panel node here. So I can plug in my surface into here and I can get a divided surface. So let's say I wanted to extrude these planes up relative to the height of the mountains. What do I need to do first in order to do that? I wanted there to be I want to extrude, have planes that are extruded up based on that mountain, each mountain. Any idea what the first thing you might want to do with the surface? Surface is already divided. We have U divisions and V divisions.
The area. Yeah, we have to put in the U.
So we want a square panel for every mountain. So I need to make sure that I have a square for every mountain. So I need to make sure that my U and V divisions equal out to a divided plane that has the same amount of boxes as I have mountains, right? So we can definitely do that, and we'll see. I'm just going to save this real fast because this will potentially crash my computer. So don't do that. Don't do what I'm about to do, and I'll show you. We'll see why it won't work. So we have our list length here, which is the length of the list. I'm going to plug that into my U divisions, and I'll plug that into my V. I have way more panels. I only have 120 mountains. And if I put a panel at the end here, I have 120 mountains, but I have 14,399 panels on this surface. Anybody know why? Yes. Not necessarily half. I don't think it's half. Whoops, somebody heard it. Square root, I believe, would be the right. So if I plug my list length into that square root, I'll get a result. So it's not going to be perfect because it's not going to. I think this is the right method. Maybe you're right, Isaac, but I think it would be square root. So if I plug this in, now I have 120. The number isn't perfect. As you can see, it's 10 point something, but it rounded to my panels, so I have 120 panels now. So now all I need to do, so what if I want to do extrude these panels to the right height? I could use the extrude command. I could say my base as these surfaces. Oh no, I can't because I should be able to do that. Oh, I can't plug that. I have to plug the panel in there. There we go. Not the panel. Plug the panels into there. And then I need a direction, so I want to extrude it up. So I'm going to use the Z. And if I just plug the Z direction, it's just going to go up in a small amount, which isn't what we want. We can use our remap numbers up here and plug those down into my node, and you'll see that I now have this weird surface with different extruded height cubes that are relative to our mountain heights. But as you can tell, they're still in that weird order, so if I wanted to reorganize it again from tallest to shortest, tallest to shortest, I'll just reorganize the height. I'll save that, go back into my Rhino file, toggle it off, toggle it back on, and now it looks more uniform because it's going from the shortest in one corner to the tallest in another.
What do you have them? Can you zoom out real quick? That's oh, okay. Thank you.
Got it?
Thank you.
Everybody else get there? So it could be any data. You know, we're just using this as a data storage dump. And even those of you who might have dynamic information, like you're talking about, this group was talking about mood, right? So you may have, I'm just not saying you do this, but this could be an option. You could have an Excel file with happy, sad, excited, whatever, and then values associated with different things. And then you could just use this as a storage for your data, and then pull that in and kind of select between the different things. So that way you don't have to do all the numbering inside of a Grasshopper. And then, like I said, this could just be a start. This could just be, I could just use this. Now I have this loft. I could use the same command I just used over here on this loft. Actually, let me put a new one in. I can plug my loft into here. And now you can see that I have panels on this surface that I could now start to manipulate, right? So this could just be something, a way to create a shape, and now I have all these panels, and let's say I want this panel to rotate whenever the sun hits it or something like that. You know, like you start to pick other, like one parameter creates the shape. This next, so this could be, this right here could be one portion of your definition to create a form, and then someone else in your group may have an idea of how, oh, this is going to rotate or move or open or close or change color. And then the next one would be working off of this data to create that next thing, right? Makes some sense. Cool. Any questions or?
Might be seems a little late when you ask this question, but I want to ask you before do you define parametrics?
Define it?
Yeah. As like into this context?
Into this context?
Yeah. Like when this project that we're doing has to involve parametrics, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what does that mean in terms of this project?
I'll answer that in this. Yeah.
Plug in different information for different situations and reach different results.
Sort of. I'll answer that question in a second. Does anybody have any questions related to like this Excel? Or everybody cool if I turn off this recording and you can watch it later, and then I'll answer Zach's question. There's no need to record all that.